Our first order of business is the roll call. Brenda, could you take roll?
Commissioner Sinclair? Here. Commissioner Grooms?
Here.
Commissioner Banks?
Here.
Commissioner Moulton? Here. Commissioner Stoltz?
Here.
Vice Chairman Derryberry? Chairman Sturdivant?
Here.
Sir, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is the invocation. We have Assistant Pastor Billy Willis to lead us in that.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, and I do pray for this commission, this board today, that you would give them wisdom in this meeting. Lord, thank you for Christmas coming up, and Lord, that we actually have a reason to celebrate Christmas in the birth of Jesus, and we thank you for that. Thank you for allowing us to be able to come to you boldly. And Lord, we do ask for wisdom now for this commission. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Our next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our next item is the public business from the floor. This is the time for citizens who would like to address the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission on any agendized item. Please complete a speaker card and identify the agenda item you would like to discuss. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Brenda, do we have any speakers?
No, sir, we have no speakers at this time.
Okay, thank you. The next item is the consent calendar. This is the approval of the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission meeting minutes of November 2nd, 2010. Do commissioners have any comments or changes? If not, could I have a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Stoltz and a second by Commissioner Banks. Please vote. Okay, the motion carries 6-0 with Commissioner Derryberry absent. Okay, on to new business. The first item is presentation regarding the Supplemental Security Income Program. As I understand from Lee, the speaker will not be available at this time, so we'll go ahead and reschedule for next month.
Yes, sir. The investigator, now we got to the investigative stage. He's in federal court.
Okay.
He's been there since last Thursday. He was going to make himself available this afternoon. If he could get out of there by noon, he's still there.
Okay. Sounds like an excused absence.
Sir, I believe so.
Okay. So I would like to note that Commissioner Derryberry has arrived.
Sorry I'm late.
Okay. Okay, next item is an update on tutoring and the formation of the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission Subcommittee to meet and formulate strategy to provide tutoring assistance at the wellness and impact homes and report back to the Commission. I know at the last meeting I had promised that I would get a hold of Concepcion Harris, and I did, and she's quite busy. So she had me meet her at the impact home in at the Trend neighborhood, and I promptly served 1.5 hours of tutoring. And afterwards, she had should I have that out? Renee Elkins show up, and she and Renee and I met for about an hour to discuss their needs at this impact home. She did indicate, Renee did, that she had been in touch with the wellness home in the Trend neighborhood, And the wellness home is not interested in providing tutoring assistance to children after hours. They will be conducting some health education issues with the children there, but the impact home is where the tutoring assistance is going to take place. Being kind of thrown into the mix in tutoring, I could see there is a very, very critical need for additional tutors at this home. So what I would like to suggest to our commission is that 3 members volunteer to form a subcommittee to figure out some strategies to obtain additional tutoring in that impact home. And I'll throw it out to the members to discuss this.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to volunteer, and I've also set up after this evening's meeting to meet with Ms. Elkins on the same matter. So.
Oh, okay, great. Okay.
I'd also like to volunteer for that committee.
Okay. Okay, so we have Commissioner Banks, Commissioner Sinclair, and Commissioner Moulton as members of this subcommittee. Is 30 days enough time for you guys to formulate some strategies to increase the tutoring assistance at this place, or should we schedule a report back to us in 2 months?
We can probably report next meeting on
Okay.
Any kind of progress or the situation.
Okay.
I don't think it takes 2 months.
Okay, great. Okay, then we'll go ahead and schedule a report back on this matter next month. I should mention that the tutoring does take place at 43028 Guyman, G-U-Y-M-O-N, on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3:30 till 5. Because we are dealing with tutoring children, Renee has asked that each member who would like to volunteer, I brought some tutoring application forms. They're very basic. They ask for simple information. There may be the need to be live scanned or fingerprinted as part of this process. So,
Tim, also one of the things that I was going to meet with Renee about, they're currently scheduled from 3:30 till 5, but they're looking at expanding it from 5 to 7 for high schoolers.
yeah, and in fact, I think they're also looking to expand it beyond Tuesdays and Thursdays. But again, tutoring needs are what going to be able to determine the number of hours that will be provided. Okay, well, I think it's real good that you've got a meeting tonight on this matter. I think that should help this matter move forward pretty quickly. Any other comments or suggestions of the commission?
What was that location?
Pardon me?
The location again?
Oh, 43028 Guyman, G-U-Y-M-O-N.
Can I make one correction? It's G-U-Y-M-A-N.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, you might get lost if you don't know.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I get lost there. I always have to put everything on my MapQuest because there's dead ends and cul-de-sacs. So sometimes it's tricky and you get twisted around. So G-U-Y-M-A-N.
M-A-N, okay.
So they only have one location? It's at one of the homes that they have the
Yeah,
tutoring?
it's at the impact home that I believe, Elizabeth, your group was involved in providing.
Correct.
In fact, a very, very nice home. Again, on a par with the wellness home in that same neighborhood.
Tim, before we get off this matter, I just wanted to thank Elizabeth for her role at the last Board of Trade monthly luncheon. There was a presentation on the Neighborhood Impact Program that Elizabeth was part of. Pastor Prather, Kevin Von Tongen, and Concepcion Harris. It was very well received by the rest of the community. So I think the more the word gets out, the more interest there is. But it was a great presentation and a lot of interest. So.
And I can tell you from personal experience, there's nothing finer than having a child look up at you at 5 o'clock and thank you very much for the help that you've provided, and the parent also doing that. Okay, item number 3 is a discussion of recent voucher program press coverage and any recommendations of the commission. Larry, I'm going to let you take the lead on this.
Okay.
Especially with your significant press background.
Well, there has been some media attention, and I thought this is probably worth discussing because I think some assumptions are being made about this commission and about the city's approach to neighborhood improvement based on some suppositions that just don't exist in fact. And, it's unfortunate that, that's happened. I know that this commission has never had any intent of approaching anything in the way of along racial or ethnic lines. We've simply looked at a program which the enforcement of has cost the city millions of dollars over the years. And we're trying to create, and I think we've had a little success in making this program better than it has been, and there's a good ways to go yet. So I just thought that we needed to somehow respond to that supposition. People can accuse us all day long of about what we do, but it's absolutely wrong to try to accuse anybody based on what you suppose they might think. And I think that entire news conference was based on a lot of supposition and playing a race card that has no business in this game.
Okay. Other comments of the commission? Larry, I shared most of what you just stated. I believe a lot of times when somebody isn't asked how they feel about a subject, they are making suppositions. I think the stance of this commission has been to actually improve the operation of the voucher program operated here in the city of Lancaster. I cannot imagine anybody being against that concept, and it was kind of a surprise for me to see that article in the newspaper. Enough said? Okay, moving on. Next item is the discussion of the formation of the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission Subcommittee to meet and address potential in-house management issues concerning the voucher program and report back to the Commission. Commissioner Banks, I know you brought this up, and I would certainly like to volunteer for this subcommittee.
Help me out a little since you helped draft the agenda. Give the rest of the commissioners kind of a little more detail on what we're trying to do here.
Okay, currently there's a consultant report being prepared that's going to recommend possible alternative management steps to take in the operation of the voucher program here in the city of Lancaster, possibly all the way up to and including the formation of the City of Lancaster Housing Authority. In order to prepare for that, there's a lot of related issues that will come up and will need to be addressed should that be the conclusion. So I believe it's, Brett, yours and my intent to form a subcommittee to try and look at these issues ahead of time and have some answers at the point where the report would be becoming public. Is that basically
exactly it? To try to take a look at the report, what some of the recommendations are, and ensure that we've addressed concerns that might be associated with those recommendations.
Okay, so we have one volunteer.
I'll volunteer.
Okay, great. Brett, did you want to be on this one?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I figured since my name was associated with
You were not.
that was a given.
Okay, then Brett, myself, and Steve will meet, and we'll report back next month. We'll figure out after today's meeting when a good time for the three of us to meet would be.
When do we suspect the report to be completed by the consultant?
Lee, can we expect that at the January meeting?
Yes, sir.
Oh, we can?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good. Then the timing for this is very good.
So are we going to plan to bring our own opinions to the next meeting, or are we going to wait till the consultant's report is done?
Well, I think the consultant report will list whatever it does, since none of us have had privy to review it at this point. So I think what we may want to look at is the issue of housing authority within the city of Lancaster and the related issues that will need to be addressed should that be a conclusion of the report. Sure. Okay. Any other comments of the commission? Okay. The next item is the review of the LACDC's monthly voucher report and recommendations of the commission to staff. Lee?
The report's not available yet, sir. It won't be out till next week.
Okay.
A little bit behind. And so as soon as that is published and we receive it, I will electronically forward to all your emails so you can obtain that report.
Okay.
Lee, what's the current situation with the management there? There used to be a gentleman that attended our meetings and council meetings that's no longer with the Housing Authority, right?
Well, actually, what I was going to do is introduce you to some representatives from the Community Development Commission. This is Mr. Emilio Salas. He is the, are you acting yet, Emilio, or have they anointed you yet? Okay, acting Assistant Executive Director. Emilio's been with the CDC for 20 years, yes. He's the Director of Personnel, correct, sir? Yes. And then Tracy Mann is our local office manager. You've met Tracy before. Sitting behind both of them is Larry Levin. Larry is our LA County Community Development Commissioner from our representative from our area, and Larry's well known here in the community. He was formerly on the AVTA board, and he's a great representative for our area as it relates to issues in the Antelope Valley. And then we all know Mr. Hickling. So, how are you, Norm? Okay, so I just wanted to introduce them here.
Okay,
Mr.
thanks.
Jenkins is apparently no longer with the Community Development Commission.
Okay.
So, in the interim, Emilio is our contact there.
Great, thanks.
I also had the opportunity to introduce myself to both the representatives from LACDC prior to the meeting, and we discussed briefly a need for more proactive provision of information concerning the operation of the voucher program in the Antelope Valley. And I do have for you to take with you some of the ideas that we would like to see on a much more regular basis than we have in the past. Thank you. Okay. Okay, the next item, we talked briefly at the last meeting because of the now very pending consultant report on the voucher program that's coming before us next month. To take a few minutes, and as long as, Lee, you would like to do this, I think I'm here to stay until you're finished. Particularly with the importance of the item coming up next month. This will be a brief overview of the voucher program for the benefit of commissioners who were not with us at the time this was last done about a year and a half ago. Lee?
Yeah, it was a series of times that we introduced information. So, I mean, if we spent doing a complete overview at one time, we'd be here for a long time. What I'd like to do is kind of how we introduced it to start with. I provided you with a letter that was put together here with staff and Mr. Bozigan that was sent to Mr. Rogan with some requests, and issues that came forward from the commission, for those issues to be addressed. So I've provided that for you. Also, some of the more frequent questions actually relate to a preference list that we talk about here, a local preference list being established through the CDC, as well as how the rent market values are calculated. So I actually provided you with the CFR, and I'm trying to do it in the same series I did it last year, to the best of my recollection, just to provide you the information. So it's kind of hopefully everyone will be a qualified expert on housing, right, after we're done going through this. But it'll probably take a couple meetings to go through all the issues that it relates there. I will provide you with the response from Mr. Rogan related to those requests, and we'll go from there. But what I actually have here today, if we can get this going, is the presentation we do through landlord training, okay, and through our Lancaster program and our landlord training program, and that's where we started last year. Are you able to get this up? Oh, well, then I'll just keep talking. Okay. So initially, I think, as folks know, the Section 8 program is mainly what we deal with here in our community, but we actually do have a representation of other HUD programs here and housing subsidy programs. We actually have 2 housing apartment complexes that are actually managed directly by the LA County Housing Authority. We also have a number of contract-based housing apartment buildings throughout the city of Lancaster, 14 exactly, where you have a private owner who has a contract with HUD and rents to qualified tenants under pretty much the same guidelines that apply to most of the Section 8 program. Then the one that's always the hot topic is the Section 8 program. And it's exclusive because it's actually the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and as its name implies, is the voucher is actually tied to the participant rather than the unit. So with the majority of all the other programs, it's the unit subsidy is tied to the unit. This one's tied to the participant. So with that comes a lot of things that we've discussed over time in here as it relates to issues in terms of here as portability, okay, the waiting list, program qualifications, all the issues that come forward with the rules and regulations as it relates to family obligations, as well as the landlord's obligations, certain requirements that we've had a cooperative relationship with LA County on as far as business licensing and those things that we'll come forward with. But initially, what the biggest issues become here are community issues as it relates to crime, right, and association of crime back to the program. And that's mainly the emphasis of this program that hopefully we're going to get going here, that it relates to something we try to work with landlords how to better manage their rental units, okay, proper screening of participants, as well as, unsubsidized tenants, different things we do to try and help them to be better landlords. So hopefully that will happen. Now,
Would it be helpful to maybe take a 5-minute break?
if we could, that would be great. That way we can get this thing back fired up.
Okay, why don't we adjourn for 5 minutes while things get set up? Okay, we'll go ahead and reconvene the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission meeting. Lee?
All right, sir, I'm sorry for that.
Okay.
And thank goodness I didn't touch it, or it'd never work again, probably. But Megan's going to go ahead and go through this. What this is this is a presentation. If you probably remember way back when that we did this for the commission as the commissioner sat at that time. Okay, and it gives you a brief outline. It does focus on the issues as we try and relate to our community members and dealing with issues related to this program. And then there's some parts in it for law enforcement. And then there's some examples of program violations that we've dealt with in the past in it. So it's just a brief overview. Okay, the assisted housing jurisdiction. LA County Housing Authority is one of several housing authorities within Los Angeles County. I know that's kind of confusing when you hear the LA County Housing Authority. But within, you also have some smaller agency housing authorities like Pasadena, Inglewood, for example. And then you have a rather large housing authority in LA City Housing Authority. So I think the total voucher numbers for all of LA County is probably slightly over 70,000 right now. But LA County's jurisdiction is slightly over 20,000 of those vouchers that are issued throughout Los Angeles County. Here this is talking more about the Antelope Valley. As you know, we have well over 3,000 units Antelope Valley wide, with about 2,200, 2,300 of those vouchers being issued here in the city of Lancaster. Also, the county has jurisdiction for all unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County and within 60 contract cities. So what I usually tell people is, if you want to know the jurisdiction of LA County Housing Authority, wherever you see the Sheriff's Department is usually where you see the jurisdiction of LA County Housing. Okay, so what we do is we talk about the Section 8 process. What happens there, again, I said the voucher holder is, it's issued to the participant. It's not tied to the unit. So what happens is we tell the landlords is, as you advertise your property, you'll be approached by people that are in possession of a Section 8 voucher. Now, that Section 8 voucher might not just be from LA County. It could be from pretty much anywhere within the United States, because it is a federal program. And then we tell them to always verify that voucher and discuss with the participant portability and issues that relates to the local agency. And then what will happen is they will do some paperwork that will start the process to move towards a contract. The housing authority will contact the owner for an inspection, and they want the unit to pass inspection for housing quality standards that are set forth in the CFR. And usually they're pretty much in line with our building and safety codes and requirements here within the city. Then what will happen is they will enter into a contract with the housing authority, with the landlord, and start from there. Now, the big thing you can see in bold letters, we always tell people, don't let the tenant move in until you have an approved contract. The only guarantee that a landlord is going to get paid is if they have an approved contract with the housing authority. So a lot of times they'll get a participant that will want to move in the unit right away, and we always encourage the landlords to either receive the rent up front, you work something out contractually with the tenant participant directly, because at that point there's no guarantee from the housing authority until that contract's signed. Okay, the program is specifically for low-income and special needs families. As a general rule, the family pays 30%, of their base income, 30% of the rent, as it relates on some factors associated with their income or what programs they might be in. And the county pays the landlord through direct deposit into their bank account the remaining portion of the rent. And again, we emphasize in here the housing authority screens tenants for eligibility in the Section 8 program, but not suitability. Meaning that is that if someone is a voucher holder, where LA County, believe it or not, has some very strict guidelines for participation as far as screening, some other agencies don't. Okay, so things we want to make sure is that the person also qualifies under what that landlord, who they would rent to based on an unsubsidized tenant. So whatever screening process they use, they still need to use as well with a voucher tenant. Okay, and this is really out of date. Okay, these are the things when we talk about all the time, the maximum allowable rents. This program's interesting because HUD sets forth what would be the maximum allowable rents for the housing authority to pay for their entire jurisdiction. Well, that's Los Angeles County. And this is where we always get into an issue as it relates to what are comprehensive rents here in the Antelope Valley. And it's been a topic of discussion in here for over a year, is really are we creating incentive out there in the community for people to rent to subsidy tenants over an unsubsidized tenant? Okay. And so, and in fact, we were just having this discussion just a second ago about how the rent comparables are done. So again, this would be based on the maximum allowable rents. Now, usually what the issue is, and the confusion comes in, is part of these rental packets for participant packets or landlords, this is posted on the website, the actual numbers as they stand today, and also part of the packet. So there's the understanding usually by the landlord is that they have a 3-bedroom house, that's how much rent they're going to get for that house. But that's not the case. It's based on the comprehensive rents in the area of an alike unit for unsubsidized units. So in other words, in the old days, we used to use 3 rent comparables in the immediate vicinity of an alike unit, unsubsidized participants, to see what the rents are. And then the rent determination, again, goes back to 34%, 30 to 40% of the total household income, and this includes whatever income is allowable in the program. Go ahead. Okay, so just calculating it out based on a rent determination, it'll show, like here in the Antelope Valley, utility allowance is allowed because we have some extreme issues here with heat and cold and things like that. And then based on the family's income, 30% of their income, the total tenant rent for this family based on those calculations would be $191. Go ahead, Meg. So if they rented a 5-bedroom house, which heck, probably a couple of years ago that would have been impossible, but that's actually could be reality nowadays here in the community. The tenant's portion of the rent would be $191, and the housing authority's payment directly to the landlord would be $1,312. Okay, is everyone clear on that then, how that's done? Okay, on the rent determination? Go ahead. So, as we get into that, we talk about the things that are usually, you know, at the forefront of issues related to this program here in the Antelope Valley. And these are just some examples of violations and fraud against the program. And as Mr. Grooms can tell you, several years ago, we put together a bill through the Assembly that went to the floor and actually became state law as it related to, in California, to a grand theft section specifically to housing fraud. Okay, grand theft is any theft of amount over $400. Okay, so that's pretty easy to meet that threshold here in the state of California on a felony level of grand theft as it relates to housing fraud. So unauthorized tenants, obviously the issue there is you have every person that resides in a Section 8 unit, or excuse me, a Housing Choice Voucher Program unit, must be authorized by the Housing Authority. And in LA County's case, those individuals are screened and must go through the screening process for eligibility. Obviously, violent crime and narcotics. Actually, HUD has a policy of zero tolerance as it relates to drug activity, narcotics. Unreported income, identity fraud, unreported assets, and subleasing. In other words, a tenant in a normal landlord-tenant situation, if there might not be a condition against subleasing in your contract or your rental agreement, and it's pretty commonplace too for landlords to allow their tenants to add an additional family member or someone to the lease for an additional cost. You can't do that in this program. Anyone that resides in that unit must be authorized to live there. Any adjustments to those contracts or as it relates to the lease must go through the Housing Authority. So types of investigations, it is an administrative program. Even though it's a program that was developed and it's legislated through Congress, there is administrative issues as it's related to it. So the investigations and activities that takes place can be administrative, criminal if it's a criminal issue, and then just abatement or nuisance issues. More likely dealing with Liz's folks with code enforcement, for example. And I have an example in here actually. It's actually not from our city, but it's a city nearby. But code enforcement goes out, they find a housing quality standard violation or some issue at a house as it relates to the municipal code, they can put that house in abatement, and that abatement will be moved forwarded to the Housing Authority. And the Housing Authority can withhold payment to that landlord until the issue is resolved, those type of issues. Go ahead. So administrative investigations can involve pretty much everything because, again, it's an administrative program through the Housing Authority. So unauthorized tenants, unreported income, narcotics activity as it's related to a household member who's been arrested for drug activity and how that relates to the participants in the house, and violent crimes. Criminal investigations all pretty much include the same, right? Any of those, that person or those individuals would not be eligible at the point that there's a violation of the program, so any rent subsidy that's paid beyond that without notification of the housing authority is fraud. Okay. So abatement nuisance, this is typically, as I described with Elizabeth's folks, is complaints from neighbors, complaints to the housing authority from the city, noise complaints, gang activity, narcotics activity, and, there's a myriad of code enforcement issues. Outcomes could be counseling and remain on the program, and these are all addressed typically, depending on a case-by-case basis. There is no flat standard that's laid out. There's discretion by the housing authority on how they manage this. And I can give you an example that we dealt with a lot. We could have an elderly person who has a family member who's a parolee, and that parolee just decides to move into their elderly family member's house and refuses to leave. Now, technically, that's a violation of the program rules because someone who's on certain crimes for probation or for parole cannot reside in a subsidized unit. But in reality, are we going to punish the elderly person who's did not authorize this person to live there, but basically became maybe a victim of, and should be notified through Adult Protective Services? So there's discretion to be used as it relates to some of these issues. Okay. So here's an example in a city nearby. Okay, obvious some code enforcement issues here as it relates. There was complaints from the city as well as the folks that lived in the neighborhood of the unkept condition of the unit. Go ahead. Right? And then working with the local agency and code enforcement as well as the property owner, there was an abatement put in place. The rent payments were frozen until the owner came in compliance with the local municipal code. Okay, so it doesn't look great, but it looks a lot better than it did. Okay, go ahead. It's just some examples. Okay, here's a type of administrative investigation. This is a participant who there was allegations that this person was working and not reporting the income. Okay, so the investigator set up a surveillance on this person. Go ahead, just go through the pictures. And they got a picture of the person leaving. They followed them, actually did their workplace where this individual worked as a receptionist at a business and had been working there for about 6 years and hadn't reported one dime of that income to the housing authority. Okay, this is a slumlord situation. There was a gentleman down in Gardena who had a unit, and he only had one unit of his 5 that would pass inspection. And there's a lot of different inspectors, especially that work out of Santa Fe Springs. And so every time he called for an inspection on the unit, you can see some of the paint change and everything over the door. He would change the number of the unit on the one unit that would pass. And unfortunately, he had the majority of his tenants were non-English speakers and were intimidated by this gentleman. Okay, and he threatened them with deportation and all kinds of issues. So he was actually, obviously, we did not do business with him anymore, and he was actually prosecuted for some issues that related to the conditions of his unit. Yes. So you can see there in the picture. Okay, this is one we have. This is my retirement plan. We have a beautiful building down in Marina del Rey. It's gorgeous. It's on Admiral's Way, so I'm actually not worried about my Lucero retirement or CalPERS. I'm just going to go live here. I'm going to have like one of my my city worker cohorts here run me over with a city vehicle or something so I can get SSI. And this is a beautiful building. And we actually had a couple that was living down there that passed away, and somehow through the estate we found out that they owned some pretty valuable property in Los Angeles. So we were able to attach their estate and recover the money back to the County of Los Angeles for the time that they were residing inside our beautiful complex there, which you can't really fault them. It is really a nice building. But go ahead. So what we do is we actually have a very active program working with the district attorney's office, and including what I stated earlier as far as legislation as it relates directly to grand theft and fraud here in the state of California. And so this is just something that we promote, and we actually present a class through the Peace Officer Standard Training as it relates to housing fraud and program fraud. So this is just something as we work with local agencies. Go ahead, go through that. Now, this is here as in our city program here in Lancaster, as it relates to all our multifamily, multi-housing programs. And then again, you can see how we have a relationship in most of the cities throughout Los Angeles County. So it's not just exclusive here, but the Housing Authority maintains these programs all over the county. Law enforcement assistance, and there's some examples in here, police reports, calls for service, probation, parole information, which is obvious violation issue, criminal activity, and cars. And that's things we always promote. A good way to tell if a family's living above their head is what kind of cars are parked in the driveway. As Clint Dragoo loved to tell you, we usually knew how big the fraud was by the size of the big screen TV in the house, right? And it sounds funny, but it actually has some merit. So here's an example of an unauthorized tenant. This is actually a participant that was involved in a police report, and then in the report she voluntarily tells the officers that took the initial report that her boyfriend had been residing in the unit for a long period of time. Okay, so just based on that report, the fact the Sheriff's Department compared it to an agency list, found out it was a Section 8 unit, and forwarded that information on to the Housing Authority based on the unauthorized tenant. Here's another one where a participant actually applied for a restraining order and listed on the restraining order that she owned the location with her parents that the taxpayers were paying the mortgage payment on. Okay, she was actually a Section 8 participant, and you can't rent your house to yourself. Okay, this is just some as they work with parole and probation. And this was a significant operation over on Kingtree several years ago, where it was a complete unit that probably 90% of the building was rented to Housing Choice Voucher Program participants, and there were some significant issues there. This is an example of, we actually had a participant here locally who in one photo she was the tenant, and in the other photo on ID she was the landlord. Okay, so another situation there. We obtained a search warrant and found documents that tied to both IDs. Go ahead. And that's a little loud. Okay, and that's just an example of what was in our local paper. Go ahead. Who turned that up like that? Okay, here's one in the city of Paramount. Again, I told you that there's a zero tolerance on narcotics activity. There also is on gang activity. This is actually a photo where you see someone bagging up marijuana. One gentleman there is flashing gang signs, and the other one's doing a money show, and this picture is actually on the refrigerator in the unit. So it's a picture within their unit of them being involved in this activity, which obviously they were terminated from the program for that activity in the unit. This is just, we can go through this. This is just kind of a notorious place down in Carson, Scottsdale Townhomes. It's on Avalon. It's been problematic for some time. It's 200 individually owned condominiums that have a high rate of voucher participants in. So this is just some of the things that have come out of there. Go ahead and go through that Irwindale case. But this is just more oriented towards to give them examples. The issues that we want to relate to the deputies, how the Housing Authority cooperation level between the two can be useful for both agencies, okay, and that a lot of the referrals that come to the Housing Authority come from law enforcement agencies as it relates to arrests, problem calls for service, that type of thing. Then I would say probably the second largest number of complaints actually come from other participants, because participants are concerned that someday this program will have such a bad reputation that it will go away. So the participants are usually pretty good about notifying the agency of issues related to other participants. Go ahead. So this is just basically the numbers and things we provide to the public in our landlord training program. So it's brief, but it's just kind of some of the things that are out there. I will tell you here in the community, the level of crime, and I can say this very confidently, when we first started doing this local enforcement program throughout LA County, we were finding a lot of issues as it related to this program, and some pretty serious crimes with guns and narcotics and things of that nature. As we've progressed through this program since 2002, on a more street enforcement level, the degree of crime we're seeing is less as far as the overt nature of it, as far as guns and gang members and things, and it's more in program fraud based now. More issues as it relates to people defrauding the system.
Lee, I think another point needs to be made as part of this presentation, that besides the enforcement issue, which obviously should continue to be pursued, the impact of that pursuit of fraud situations actually has a very beneficial outcome. Right now, we've had reports from LACDC that there's approximately 171,000 people on a waiting list, 5,000 of whom are Lancaster city residents. And so for every individual who's frauding the program and is removed, that opens up a slot for somebody who has been spending probably, and help me Tracy, years on the waiting list? Okay. So there is a very good outcome of these kind of pursuits.
And I think what we'll, as we get into like the next presentation, we'll talk about the waiting list and the preference list, and the Housing Authority has closed the waiting list right now, and they're purging, currently going, are you still going through the purging process? So basically, people that are on that waiting list now need to be eligible at this time. In other words, people can't use it as a, well, my retirement plan, right? Get on the list, and 10 years from now, I'm going to quit my job and get on Section 8. That's not allowed. So, and that was some issues as it related to that. In the CFR, it designates that any waiting list that's longer than 2 years is, you're not managing that waiting list appropriately. Now, obviously, they're not taking into account the amount of density we have in Los Angeles County as far as population and people in need. But you know, that is significant. We have a lot of folks locally that have probably been on that waiting list almost 10 years. So, okay.
One final question. Would you like to do part 2 of this presentation prior to the consultant's report so that we provide even more education to board members prior to consultant providing?
Leisure, I have, like again, and I've showed you before how much different information we have as it relates to this program. We can get into, you know, we can provide probably a copy of the latest administrative plan to all the commissioners, which I have. So, and as you can go through that, you can understand how Los Angeles County does administer their program, and then in comparison to what we've asked for. Again, I will provide for you Mr. Rogan's response to some of those issues, which some of these have been addressed. Okay, and we can systematically go through that too as well next time, which ones have been addressed, which ones haven't, and why they haven't been.
Okay. And finally, I'd like to commend you. I think you gave us a nice bite-sized piece today in your presentation. We look forward to your next one on January.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a couple of questions, Lee, real quick? Sorry.
My kids using your place up at Tahoe this year? Because if you're letting them, I'll answer them. I'm just kidding, bro.
We can talk about that later. Portability. The issue I have with that is the commission is really trying to provide access to our local residents, right?
Right.
So each housing authority has some flexibility in what the criteria are for people to participate in that program? Is that right?
Well, portability is that and that would take some time to explain it all, and Tracy's probably way more of an expert than I am, but they have the ability to administer or to absorb that voucher,
right.
Okay, that participant. And
they have to meet the L.A. County's
yes,
requirements.
and that was something that
right?
was done several years ago. Initially, when I went to work for the Housing Authority in 2002, that was not being done.
Okay.
Okay, and actually, Supervisor Antonovich talked to the Secretary of HUD at the time was Alfonso Jackson. And the supervisor actually met with him and discussed the issues as it related to portability and background screening. And then HUD went ahead and approved the Housing Authority to be able to do that with portability participants. And that wasn't something that was being done at the time. And now you have other agencies, Kern County does it, San Bernardino County does, so a lot of the other housing agencies that are in nearby proximity to us are doing the same thing.
So by doing that, we may provide greater access than we had before for some of our local residents, right? Because these folks that want to port in may not be able to qualify.
Well, that's probably an issue. I'm sure there's folks that are turned away regularly for not meeting the screening criteria and eligibility here in L.A. County. Again, probably I think the focus and kind of where we've been on this in this discussion for a year is we really have some concerns on how we're servicing our local community.
Right.
And I think that's a theme that will probably continue until we address it. And again, knowing that the majority of people that are on that waiting list in our area are elderly or disabled folks that really have a need.
Kind of along those lines, this question relates to the City of Lancaster has a contract with LA County Housing Authority to manage the program in Lancaster. Is that the right way
We
to
have
state
an
it?
agreement for LA County to operate the program
Okay.
within the City of Lancaster. We have a contract as it relates to the Housing Authority investigators and our relationship with them and their analyst and some supervision level that Elizabeth manages that contract. But as far as the program, there is a health and safety code that exists that allows the city as a municipality to allow another government entity to operate within the city. It's within their jurisdiction to operate within our city with our approval.
Okay. So what we're doing basically is when LA County comes in, we're adopting their criteria and so on.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And there really isn't as much flexibility for the city to say, we'd still like you to manage our program, but we'd like you to look at adding these things, kind of.
Again, as it relates, the LA County does manage some small housing authorities.
Okay.
Okay, and they were actually, I believe the process was they were housing authorities that existed on their own, and then they contracted with LA County to manage their housing authority within their cities. So they do have some small, I think there's 6 or 7 at this point. 6, yes, small city housing contracts. That's a different relationship, right? Because they were a PHA.
I see.
A public housing authority, and they had the ability to do certain criteria. So and I'm sure it's close to being the same as far as rules and things, but there are something that those small city housing authorities can do differently than and require within their cities versus the city of Pasadena is a really good example. Pasadena has a preference list that has all kinds of, it's a scoring system. And so they have it as it relates to age, disability, all the criteria they put into it, and they come up with a formula, and that's where people sit on the waiting list based on that.
So as long as that
eligibility
meets
score.
the general federal requirements, you have that flexibility.
But there is a
within
lot
the
of flexibility within those.
Right, okay,
And that's one of the main reasons I gave you that preference,
right.
CFR, as it relates directly to that, because there is a lot of flexibility within that on how you want to manage that. Now, there's some things you've got to be careful, right? You got to address the fair housing issues, right? You can't discriminate against folks. There's things that fall within that, but at the same time, it does give you some flexibility on how you create that preference list.
Okay, thanks.
Last question.
Please.
Lee, I was curious. I noticed on the chart that the tenant's portion of the rent is approximately 30% of their income. Is that
30% of the rent,
of the
based
rent?
on their income.
Based
So
on
what
their-
their income, and there's a formula for that, figuring that, and they have to pay 30% of the rent. That's the norm.
Now,
Let me make a comment right there. Lee, I think you mean they pay 30% of their income towards rent.
Yes, I'm sorry.
that's kind of what I was talking about. Okay. My point was, I noticed on the chart it includes all public assistance, SSI, all this is included as part of their income, correct?
Correct.
So if a tenant qualifies and becomes a registered tenant in Section 8, and then all of a sudden they acquire more income, like let's say they now get SSI that they didn't get before, is there a mechanism in effect to report that?
Yes.
To the housing authority, to the county, to whoever?
Part of the family obligations is they're supposed to report any changes in income or family status as it occurs.
No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, there's no
To verify it?
interconnect between agencies?
No. There is some within the county agencies, but you have to seek it. It isn't automatically reported. There is a system in the federal government for like the EIV system, which I know you're familiar with, with all federal programs that tracks with Social Security numbers, anything that's reported, your taxes, all type of things. The Housing Authority does have access to that. They do go through a process in annuals, correct? On their annual updates to check those systems that are out there. But On the other issues, the family is supposed to report that stuff, and when it's discovered that they haven't, that's a program violation.
Okay.
And that's usually how it comes to light. Something will be initiated, there'll be some complaint. As the investigators or the administrative investigation takes place internally, they will discover these things as it goes forward. And then it goes back to when the documentation that the head of household and the family last filled out, how accurate that is. There's issues in it for perjury. I mean, as you see, not just as it relates to this program, but like that's a common issue as it's related to welfare fraud, and usually you'll see an adjoining charge to perjury, okay, for not giving true information on documentation, those type of things that come to light.
Okay, I understand. But there's no scheduled review of those factors like income and
Yes,
and
no, there is a schedule every year. There is an annual review every year. But in the interim, as things come to light, that's one of the places you go as an investigator. Okay, you go to income verification.
Okay.
Or if there's some change that comes forward through administratively, the administrative offices will go through a review of that income. And what they're reporting. So it can occur more than once a year, depending on what the situation is, or if someone turns in something to move in the interim, then they have to go read through the eligibility process for a new unit. There's all kinds of issues as it relates to that.
It's just incredible sometimes when you read some of the numbers of people that have been violated or that have violated their Section 8 agreement, that this person's paying $94 a month for their portion of the rent, and the government is paying $1,500 or something to that effect. That's just seems incredibly low.
Well, I think that's the rub for folks. Okay, that's the rub out there, and then so it's the taxpayers have provided an ability for people to have a place to live, and you need to respect that and live within the program rules. And the living within the program rules is nothing beyond than just living a normal lifestyle that the rest of us live every day. So there's not some outstanding requirement by the agencies and demands on folks. At the same time, there has been work done within LA County especially within the county agencies. We did several years ago, and Norm can talk about this, where we're trying to get everyone on the same database, okay, with DCFS, because DPSS, let's face it, they manage the majority of the subsidy programs that are occurring out there, state and federal programs. And to get everyone on the same page, and it was very difficult because everyone's system is so different, they don't link up. And that was a real problem, and the county did look at that for some time and spent a significant amount of money. Now, the federal government will not allow you to attach other inquiries into the EIV system. It will, in fact, it's very specific for employees who can access it, when they can access it, and it's very restrictive. So that's part of the problem. It would be great that if something came up or a change came up, for example, in an issue with DPSS or someone's program over there, whether it's welfare to work or family reunification or whatever it might be, that immediately notification went to the housing authority or other agencies within the county to verify what was reported to them. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
Lee on the hot seat.
The hot seat. I like that, actually.
Okay. Lee, thank you again. That
All right,
was
thank
very
you.
good. We appreciate it. Okay, the last item on the agenda is a brief discussion of next month's possible agenda topics. I have the Social Security investigator, the consultant's report, a report from the tutoring committee, and a report from the voucher subcommittee. Does anybody else have items they'd like to add to next month's agenda?
I'd like to hear an update. I understand the city has been in working on a scavenger type ordinance for trash cans, recyclables, and so forth in the neighborhoods. We talked about that briefly a couple of months ago, and I don't know.
Last month, at the last meeting, you recommended that it go before the city council.
Okay.
So it's going to the next meeting, which is next Tuesday.
Okay, so we can hear about that if there's anything new or different at the next meeting, and unless.
Yeah, you can attend the city council meeting.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's when it'll
No, I
be
know.
discussed,
That's
you know.
fine. It's different now that I don't have to, but, thanks.
Can I add something maybe for discussion, maybe comments at the end? I usually have to use that. Elizabeth and I were discussing a couple issues as it related to the mayor's comments as it relates to truancy and this program and probably other programs. And Liz had it. We discussed a couple items as it relates to the schools or maybe something legislatively through the state, similar to what we've done with grand theft. So, Liz, would you want to bring forward yours and what you were thinking, and then just for consideration for the commission, and maybe we can have further discussion at the next meeting?
When Mayor Rex Paris brought up the issue at the City Council meeting, I received information from Antelope Valley School District and Lancaster School District, and they do have policies, procedures regarding truancy. They take truancy very seriously as they receive funds for children being in school. But not only that, they have a goal that all children receive an education. So they have a process in place that goes from beginning investigation to prosecution. So what I feel should take place, as we've done before in the past with Section 8, is that they add somewhere in their contract is that if the parents are prosecuted for non-attendance, that it's an automatic, they get automatically suspended from the Section 8 program. That was what I came up with, and then Lee had another one that was very good too.
Well, in our discussion, because, there is requirements under like Welfare Reform Act requires that your school kids attend school, and if there's some habitual truancy issue or things that could impact your welfare. But beyond that, as I mentioned earlier, is related to the legislation we did here in the state and made it a statewide issue as far as housing fraud. Maybe, Mr. Grooms, this is something we can consider bringing something to the California legislature, making it a requirement of housing subsidy programs here in California that families ensure that their students are in school. And, this is one, and Lou will understand this one, as school districts out there survive solely on ADA, on their average daily attendance. If kids don't attend schools, the districts don't receive the money. So while they have to provide the resources and the teachers and administration and school facilities and everything, they're not guaranteed that dollar amount for those students. So maybe it's something we can look at, something as it joins together, something statewide that mandates in California for programs to operate within California, so we don't have some fluctuation between jurisdictions too.
So we thought this commission could work on getting the legislation through based on there's a vast experience on this commission for that. And then also maybe work on Section 8 in adding something within their contract that they have with the tenant. So we thought that could be something that you could work on, and it would take a while, but I think it's doable.
And I think the foundation for that, Tim, I'm sorry, but is, as Liz brought forward with the business licensing issue. One of the requirements in the city for you to have rental property and be a landlord is you have to have a business license for that rental unit. The Housing Authority has worked with the city of Lancaster in regards to that, and they actually verified that the individuals have a business license to operate within the city of Lancaster before they finalize that contract.
Correct, which has made it much easier for this city to be able to do the rental inspection program and monitor the conditions of those rentals.
Okay, I can see the commission working on an issue of proposed state legislation. I'm wondering if the LACDC, which currently has a cooperation agreement to operate the voucher program within the city of Lancaster, would be better placed to bring back to our board their ideas concerning how they may implement suspension of housing assistance payments for individuals, families whose children are not attending school.
So what you would like to do on the next commission meeting is to take an action. This is a discussion.
Yeah, we can't take an action at this
Correct.
point.
So then the commission can take an action at the next meeting on exactly how they want to go about doing both actions.
Okay. Would it be possible for you to attend our January 4th meeting and present us with your ideas concerning that topic? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, do we want to make it maybe even more formalized in like a letter form to Mr. Rogan? And is that taking an action by doing that?
That is an action.
Okay. Just checking.
Okay, I'll go ahead and agendize LACDC presenting us with some ideas concerning the suspension of housing assistance payments for issues involving truancy. And then I'll schedule another item, which is the commission, perhaps convening a subcommittee to develop ideas for the creation of some state legislation pertaining to this, if that sounds good. Okay. Okay.
Mr. Sturtevant, I just had one question.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned that you had some information that you were going to request from CDC, and I was taking it that it was the breakdown in elderly, et
Yeah.
cetera.
Actually, at the break, Tracy came up here, and I provided her the information we've been seeking on a very regular basis. I asked her to go back and take a look at that information. She has my phone number and email and can contact me concerning any questions she has about it, including whether we can receive that on a monthly or quarterly basis.
Okay. One of the breakdowns I was thinking about were our veterans. How many veterans are on, the Section 8 housing program? How many on the waiting list are waiting for a voucher? And that is there any way that they could somehow get preference?
Okay.
I mean, I know that, my contention has been the port-ins that can come in from anywhere around the nation, but then we have 7,000 people that are still on our waiting list here in Lancaster, whether they be elderly or handicapped or, veterans, I would think would get serviced first.
And they are a preference. On
Okay.
And we also have a separate voucher program specifically for veterans.
For veterans. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, perhaps in addition to those items I provided you, if you could provide the number of veterans receiving assistance, and again, since our interest is in the city of Lancaster, it'd be the city of Lancaster residents, and then the number of veterans, city of Lancaster residents who are veterans on the waiting list. We're on a roll. I want to fill up February and March, too. Okay, I appreciate all the input on the next agenda. I do know we've all received several items of information. I can speak to one. I'm still in touch with the agency that I used to work for, so I have cut out an article from the San Diego Union identifying some of the accomplishments of this agency over the past 30 years. I think personally that housing agencies can be of immense benefit to the community, and that's my purpose in passing out this article. I also have an article concerning Atlanta's public housing revolution. I'm not sure.
I came across that, and I asked Ms. Tate to hand that out to the commissioners. I just thought it was interesting.
Okay.
Howard Husick is actually the one that wrote the book, I know I'm going to mess up the title, but it's the $3 million failure, which is the housing. I'll be nice.
Okay, and then I notice we also have an invitation to attend meeting concerning the master plan for trails and bikeways, which I guess is January 27th. Okay.
Just to let you know too as well, Megan is putting together the calendar for the next couple of months for neighborhood watch meetings and community meetings. So we'll make sure that all that gets sent out to you, all your emails.
Okay, appreciate that.
Megan's been, if you haven't met Megan Canal, Megan runs our neighborhood watch program. Have you had a night off in like a month and a half? She is making this program grow like crazy. She's doing a phenomenal job, and every night, because her schedule's adjusted like crazy, okay? And I know she's putting in way more hours than I'm paying her for, but it's just the way it is around here sometimes.
Okay.
But she's doing a fantastic job. But I want to make sure that you guys all get that. And we have some area meetings that we're setting up, our large meeting for our neighborhood watch group, and in our districts. We're going to have 4 over January, February, March, and April. They'll probably be at a local high school, depending on which area we're in. I'd like to invite you so I can introduce you to the public, and that's an open invitation. So not just to our groups, it's open public meeting, it's block captains, all the thing in our whole restructure of this program. And again, Megan's just been working her tail off, but she's doing a great job.
Okay. Lee, I think I'll take you up on that offer to attend. I think all of the commissioners probably could make a New Year's resolution to attend one of these meetings, because I think if we hear from the community some of their concerns, we may find ourselves with a number of additional agenda items to address.
Right. Great.
Okay. Last item is public business from the floor. We request any person who would like to address the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission on non-agendized matters to complete a speaker card, and you will find speaker cards on the back table of the council chambers. Additionally, we respectfully request that you fill the cards out completely and print as clearly as possible so that, if necessary, the commission or city staff will be able to contact you either by phone or mail. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. When you approach the podium, please notice there are 3 lights. The green light comes on when you begin, the yellow light will come on when you have 30 seconds remaining, and the red light will come on when your 3 minutes are up. We ask that you be considerate of the allotted time to allow other speakers to have their 3 minutes as well. Following this procedure will allow for a smooth and timely process for the commission meeting, and we appreciate your cooperation. State law prohibits the Lancaster Neighborhood Vitalization Commission from taking action on items not on the agenda, and your matter will be referred to staff. Brenda, do we have any speakers?
Sir, we have no speakers at this time.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other business, I wish everybody very happy holidays, and we'll see you next year.